Donald Trump has just secured two major Supreme Court victories. The first being that he can deport people using the Alien Enemies Act. And the second, he will not have to return an individual who is here illegally, alleged by a judge, or I should say confirmed by a judge, depending on your perspective, to be an MS-13 gang member. He will not be returned to this country. I will say, despite the fact Trump has no authority to force a foreign country to return a guy to a different country. I mean, you can negotiate, I guess, but the Supreme Court basically said Trump is right. Interestingly, Amy Coney Barrett has defied the conservatives once again, siding with the liberals. And many conservatives are, well, I should say it's unsurprising to them, but they are not happy with Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who appears to have flipped on her principles and is once again siding with the liberals. Here's a story from Vox.com. The Supreme Court just made it easier for Trump to deport people. Despite the fact there isn't a plausible argument, the Alien Enemies Act can be used to do so. You know what I love about Vox.com? You know what I love about leftist and liberal publications? The Supreme Court literally laid out the reasoning and said, Trump is allowed to do this. There you go. And they go, no, court's wrong. I mean, that's fine. But if you're going to be a news source, you can't just come out and say, despite the fact the Supreme Court said it makes sense, Trump can do this, you then come out and say, but it's not plausible, so he can't. You are just some guy, Ian Millhiser, the guy who wrote this. You're some guy. The Supreme Court is the Supreme Court. And sometimes we disagree with them. Indeed. My point is not that you can't disagree with the Supreme Court, because obviously conservatives do all the time. It's just funny that you said there's no plausible argument. There literally is. The Supreme Court made it. But here's a story from Vox.com. And by the way, senior correspondent for Vox, where he focuses on the Supreme Court and the Constitution and the decline of liberal democracy in the United States. These people are insufferable. On Monday night, the Supreme Court handed down a 5-4 decision, tossing out a closely watched district court decision, which blocked Donald Trump, his attempt to use a 227-year-old law, the Alien Enemies Act. Let me stop right there and say, we're going to play a game called Let's Inform the Audience of When They're Being Manipulated. The reason they put in to use a 227-year-old law is to imply there is something wrong with the law for being old. Murder is also it's older than 227 years, and you're not allowed to kill people either. So they say he uses it to deport many individuals without due process. I will stop right there. Now, the court did say there's got to be more, but the argument of what due process is in play. And that is, yes, everyone's warranted due process. My question then to you is, what process are you due? Right? If you're not a citizen of this country, it is, we check to see if you are. If you are not, then we say, off you go. That's your due process. Now, they're arguing that there should be an adversarial hearing and the accused illegal immigrant should get a judge or, a lawyer to argue on their behalf, which is an impossibility. Thus, what I will say is the left knows how to break the system. This is their game plan. You flood the country with 10, 20 million illegal immigrants, depending on who you ask, the number's low or high. And then when Trump says, no, they can't come in here, you go, well, now each of them need a lawyer. Good luck deporting that many people in 4 years. Indeed. They say the court largely voted along party lines, although Republican Justice Amy Coney Barrett crossed over to dissent with the 3 Democratic justices. The court's decision in the Trump v. JGG is a win for Trump. It is not a total victory. The court does not express an opinion on whether the Alien Enemies Act actually permits Trump to deport anyone. It also rules that before anyone is deported under this law, that person must be given notice and an opportunity to challenge their removal. So they call this largely a victory for Trump, but I think it's not necessarily. This is what the left wanted, to make it impossible. It's how are we going to run 10 million, let's go low end, 10 million people through the courts to determine whether or not they're citizens or here illegally? Indeed. They say the decision is still a significant victory for Trump and a loss for anyone Trump administration deems worthy of deportation. For starters, Judge James Boasberg, the district court judge, had issued a blanket order that temporarily blocked all deportations under the Alien Enemies Act, which is psychotic, by the way. Those deportations can now resume. The Supreme Court's decision also rules that anyone Trump targets must bring a habeas proceeding, a process that ordinarily can only be used by a single individual to challenge their detention by the government. This means judges can only bar detention on a person-by-person basis, which is a tremendous victory for Donald Trump. As Justice Sonia Sotomayor warns, individuals who are unable to secure counsel, who cannot timely appeal an adverse judgment rendered by a habeas court, face the prospect of removal directly into the perilous conditions of El Salvador's Center for Terrorism Confinement, where detainees suffer egregious human rights abuses. I hate these people. I'm sorry, I have to say it. They have spit in our faces and they use our principles against us. At a certain point, I just say, no. I'm sorry, man. I don't like that Trump is sending anybody to El Salvador. It is stupid. If it's going to be MS-13, whatever, fine. However, at the same time, the left has intentionally created an impossible situation where you deport these people, they come right back. You get a habeas proceeding. It's going to take years to deport these people. That's their game plan. So Trump's options are mass deportation or effectively nothing. And that's the game they're playing. Oh, no, but the human rights abuses. Okay, agreed. Fine. I don't like SCOTUS, as they call it. So what we're going to do is blame you. I'm going to blame all of the liberals for everything that happens after this fact because y'all flooded this country with illegal immigrants, told them to come when they couldn't, when it didn't make sense, and it was bad for the country. So everything that happens now is your fault. But they don't care. This is the important thing to understand, ladies and gentlemen. Who are we arguing to? Who cares? They will say to you, but you can't let them go to these horrible prisons. My response is, it's your fault. You did this. You did it. Now, certainly Trump can what? Dump them all in Mexico? They're not all Mexican citizens. Mexico would be furious. To be fair, they did it to us. Maybe that is the plan. Or maybe that is the play. They're going to say, habeas proceedings must be brought into place where the person seeking relief is detained. Thus far, the Trump admin has transferred prisoners it intends to deport under the Alien Enemies Act to Texas, which is located in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit's jurisdiction. The Fifth Circuit Court is the most right-wing court in the federal appellate system. If someone brings a habeas suit in its jurisdiction and the decision is appealed to the Fifth Circuit, the court could hand down a precedent that means any habeas proceedings challenging these deportations would fail. Thank God. That's good news. The Supreme Court's decision on JGG stands on dubious legal grounds. Really? Habeas is the correct process for anyone who challenges the government's decision to detain them. But the individuals at issue in JGG do not challenge the government's authority to detain them. They only challenge the government's ability to deport them under the Alien Enemies Act, which, of course, they can. As the court said in Skinner v. Switzer, 2011, there is no case in which the court has recognized habeas as the sole remedy, or even an available one, where the relief sought would neither terminate custody, accelerate the future date of release from custody, nor reduce the level of custody. Finally, while the Supreme Court does not reach the question of whether the Alien Enemies Act can be used by Trump to deport people, the answer is to question under the current law is an emphatic no. The act, which has only been used 3 times in American history before Trump took office, may only be used against citizens of a country that the United States is at war with, or against a country that is engaged in a military invasion of the United States. The United States is not at war, nor has it been invaded. Wrong. Trump declared an invasion. The president has a right to declare an invasion. You have millions of people flooding the southern border. And dare I say, the world these people live in, I find to be absolutely hilarious. We have videos of people marching by the thousands to America, waving the flags of their nation. And you say, not an invasion. So what you're saying is that if a country rallies up thousands of individuals and says, go and enter America, but just don't tell them we told you, we can't do anything about it. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. No one would intend for it the law to function that way. They'd say, if they're marching towards our border with the flag, that is them declaring it. Unless that country wants to stop them, which they're not doing. Maybe now, actually, with Trump in office, in power, maybe. They say, Realistically, it's unlikely the court can avoid the question of whether Trump may invoke this wartime statute for long. Indeed, it is in the likely event the Fifth Circuit denies relief to people Trump seeks to deport, one of them is likely to seek Supreme Court review of that decision. For now, however, the court gets to delay the showdown. The one silver lining in the JGG case is that all 9 justices agree that anyone Trump seeks to deport under the Alien Enemies Act must be given an opportunity to find a lawyer and challenge their deportation, which I would largely say is a defeat, because that will make it functionally impossible to deport anyone. Yeah. Newsweek says, why Amy Coney Barrett sided with liberals on deportation case. Because she's a lib. Because she's a lib. Trump made a big mistake. This is what you get. Conservative SCOTUS Amy Coney Barrett sided with the liberal wing of the court. She was nominated by Trump and has emerged as a centrist judge. Yeah, no, she's a liberal, with a key role in deciding major Supreme Court cases. On April 7th, the Supreme Court allowed the Trump administration to use the Wartime Alien Enemies Act. We get it. Amy Coney Barrett was the sole conservative to dissent, because she's a liberal, siding with the 3 liberal judges. Coney Barrett was very careful in choosing which parts of Sotomayor's strident dissenting opinion she supported. While Kagan and Brown-Jackson put their names on Sotomayor's dissenting opinion in total, Coney Barrett only agreed with Part 2 and Section B of Part 3. That means while Coney Barrett agreed with Sotomayor's overall opinion, she avoided some of Sotomayor's most colorful criticisms. For example, in Part 1, Sotomayor alleged that the Trump admin was trying to covertly deport people without judicial oversight. Sotomayor wrote, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Coney Barrett agreed entirely with Part 2 of Sotomayor's opinion, which is far more conciliatory in tone. Here, Sotomayor notes that Supreme Court justices agree on a crucial point, that anyone facing deportation under the Alien Enemies Act is entitled to a court hearing and due process. Quote, begin with that upon which all 9 members of this court agree. The court's order today dictates in no uncertain terms that individuals subject to detention and removal under the AEA are entitled to judicial review as to questions of interpretation and constitutionality of the act, as well as whether he or she is in fact an alien enemy 14 years of age or older. Congratulations. What this means, well, they didn't win this one, but, or actually they did. This is the part of it where they all did rule that you're going to get I would call it expanded due process. That's it. I don't understand how they're saying this is a victory for Donald Trump, to be completely honest. There's, as I mentioned, let's say low end, 10 million illegal immigrants into this country. Trump wants to deport them. How are you going to have 10 million cases? It's not possible. And anytime an illegal immigrant is arrested, they're going to demand a trial, which is going to take months. The question of due process is, and should be, do you have documentation proving citizenship? Okay, you don't. Bye. That's it. Now, I suppose there's a challenge here, and this is what the left is exploiting. There may be an individual who is an American citizen who doesn't have any proof. And I suppose we should do it like this. In the event that an individual admits they're not a citizen and they're here illegally, we say, okay, you got to go. Now, they could lie later on and try and render this country, and therein lies the challenge. Donald Trump has less than 2 years to get a handle on this. He's functionally got a year. What with the midterms coming up? I know it's that crazy. I don't see how he does it. I got to be honest. I don't see how he does it. Look, I think it'd be a problem if an American citizen got deported, seriously, because he was not an English speaker. He grew up in a Spanish community in this country, and he didn't have his ID on him or something. Mixes his name up, and he's like, I'm an American, trust me. I suppose in the event that a person alleges they're an American and they can provide evidence, the due process should be, let's make sure we can give an opportunity to do that. I suppose that's what they're saying with these hearings. If every single person Trump tries to deport gets a hearing, he will never deport them. He'll deport maybe, a few thousand? This is judicial coup. The Biden administration reportedly was deporting more than Trump is now. To be fair, Donald Trump has shut the border down effectively for illegal immigration. But where was this ruling under Joe Biden? Indeed. They say Coney Barrett did not shy away from criticizing the court's conservative majority for taking the case on an emergency basis without letting it first go through the normal federal appeal court system. Here she agreed with Section B, Part 3, in which Sotomayor criticized the Supreme Court majority for hurriedly overruling a Washington, D.C. District Court Judge, James Boasberg, who had halted the deportations. If the district court were to resolve the question in plaintiff's favor, the government could have appealed to this court in the ordinary course. and we could have decided it after a thorough briefing and oral argument. In its rush to decide the issue now, the court halts the lower court's work and forces us to decide the matter after mere days of deliberation and without adequate time to weigh the parties' arguments or the full record of the district court's proceedings. I'm just so sick of it. Guys, I have heard it over and over again from so many people who argue we are being destroyed by a ruthless enemy. Let's sit here and have committee meetings and stand on principle. Okay, you lose. We talk about it quite a bit with the Confederacy. The Confederates won the First Battle of Bull Run, routing the Union forces. And as they approached the river, they could have crossed over into D.C. and they said, no, because we are principled. We seek only recognition. We have routed the Union forces. Hear, hear, huzzah, let's go home. Amazing. And then they end up getting crushed. If the Confederacy, and we're lucky they didn't, mind you, if the Confederacy after the First Battle of Bull Run marched on D.C., they would have taken Abraham Lincoln. They would have taken the White House. They would have taken the government and said, you will now negotiate with us. We won. What a crazy country this would be were that the case. Now, some have argued that slavery would have been abolished no matter what. I'm pretty content with this, with the Confederates having lost that one. They literally want to enshrine slavery in their Constitution. So they lose. The lesson learned here is, as people like Amy Coney Barrett and many of these conservatives are like, slow down there, guys. We have to make sure that we tie our hands behind our backs. Okay, you lose. That's whatever. Listen, man, I'd prefer winning, maintaining this country, securing its borders, protecting its interests, bringing jobs back, all that good stuff. Trump is doing a heck of a bang-up job so far. I would, but I got to be honest. I am also fine with living in a van down by the river. I have no problem working on a farm 24/7. I work more than 16 hours a day as it is. Here's my schedule. I wake up at about 7 o'clock. I've been getting up early. I've been going to bed a little bit earlier, but I get up at about 7 and immediately check my notifications, look for breaking news, get cleaned up, make breakfast for the family. At about 8:30, I'm here pulling up news stories. So to be fair, let's say I start at 8 and then I wrap up the workday at about 11 p.m. when Timcast IRL wraps up its uncensored after show. So, call it, I don't know, however many hours you want to call it. I'm asleep by probably about midnight, maybe like 11:45. I've been going to bed a little bit earlier. And then I wake up once again at 7. I got no problem waking up at the crack of dawn, tending to chickens and goats and cows and farming. I have no problem doing hard work. I have no problem dedicating my life to all that stuff. So to those conservatives that are like, we can't do anything about this, I'm like, okay, whatever, man, do your thing. When it all comes crashing down around you, it'll suck, but whatever. Maybe that's the problem with conservatives, is they're content in knowing that for the most part, if it all did collapse, they just have no problem living on a farm and doing a homestead, right? Ultimately, my point is this. While Donald Trump does have some other victories, notably this one, which is kind of funny, Supreme Court briefly pauses order to return deportee from El Salvador because he can't. It's stupid. They are still facing an uphill battle. The courts are in judicial coup. You've got 677 district courts, and any one of them can say, nope, to Donald Trump. And then he's going to go to the Supreme Court, who's going to be split and side against him. Okay, we lose. That's it. What a pathetic country we are, if that's the case. The founding fathers talked about all of these things that we needed to do to ensure our country could survive. And here we are with the country being ripped to shreds, and the structures put in place prevent anyone from rescuing the nation from its own downfall. Therein lies the challenge of any form of government. Now, don't get me wrong. The founders were brilliant, and they created a great system of governance. But unfortunately now, the judiciary overpowers the executive, and the executive's hands are tied, and they can't do anything. So the executive, what are they going to let do? Trump could say he's going to bomb a foreign country, and they wouldn't do anything about it. They never do that for any other president. But Trump wants to do something simple like deport people, and they say no. Here's the reality. I think the principal reason is Social Security will be insolvent in a matter of years. All of these powerful elites, they feel like in order to save this country, this is deep state, bureaucratic state, we need a larger population. The elderly are living longer. They're getting Social Security. You need 2.5 to 4 workers to enter the system for every new Social Security recipient. I mean, it's actually quite simple. You want to give a Social Security recipient, what, 800 something bucks a month, right? You need to take that much from somebody else. But you can't take it from somebody who's only making 2,000 bucks a month, right? So you need to take it from 3 or 4 individuals, a little bit from each person, probably more. The argument is that entering the workforce isn't necessarily just 10 bucks an hour or whatever, or 20 bucks an hour. You might get a little bit more than that. So they start taxing new workers, and they need more for each elderly individual. But guess what? People aren't having kids. The end result, the system implodes. I think Donald Trump, a lot of the moves he's making, is to empower Gen Z and correct the market so that it is not overwhelmingly the elderly that hold the wealth and hoard it from the youth, which is what's happening. Homes are owned by boomers. Stocks are overwhelmingly owned by boomers, and Gen Z has nothing. And not a single snowflake will blame themselves for the avalanche. So this country is in trouble. And you know what it is? The courts, the judges, the Democrats, they don't want the system to stop, but it will implode. So whether they block Trump or Trump does it himself, hope you guys are ready for what that system looks like. Maybe Trump will win. I hope so. We'll wrap it up there. Stay tuned. We got more segments coming up, my friends. Next up at noon, and we'll see you all then.